Hi, everyone. It is Mimi from Be Heard, Empower Yourself. I'm having a crazy Saturday, but it's interesting. And I have an interesting person as usual. All my guests are awesome. Lynn Harris, and this isn't her first rodeo. She told me that right away. And she's a comedian and a journalist. And Lynn, I am going to let you tell us about your background. I had um, a lot of obstacles when I grew up. A family, that alcoholic father,
Mm,
cold, narcissistic mother, never got any pats on the back or kisses. It was really cold. And I they wanted me to stay home forever and make money for the family.
hmm.
And in the 60s, the only way you could escape as a woman was to get married.
Yeah.
So then, of course, who did I marry? My father. They always say
See
that.
what you did there. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're your father. So I went through the abusive marriage and things like that, a lot of trauma, and turned to alcohol as a self-medication. Later on, finding out that I had chronic depression, anxiety disorder, and I was self-medicating. End of the story is a happy one, though, because I finally take the right path, find some spirituality and sobriety in my life. So
Hmm.
30,
Hmm.
35, yeah, 34 years I am sober. Yeah.
Congratulations.
and
Amazing.
and spiritually connected 21 years.
Hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. That
So
is a
that's me.
triumphant story.
And
Yeah.
that's only the bones. You have to buy my book, Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons, if you want the whole story. And she's a
And
cat
yes,
lady.
here's my yes. I hope no one's allergic to cats. Here is
Oh,
a cat who has joined us.
I had a cat for 18 years and I was allergic to him. Get rid of.
Yeah, I
All right.
know.
So what's your back? Tell us your backstory. You started off with some rough bumps, I'm sure.
Oh, sure. Although, what you made me think of was to talk, just for contrast, to talk about a different type of obstacle. And these are really inseparable in some ways, but the one I was going to address was patriarchy. And what I mean by
Oh,
that is, oh,
yes.
that. And that's really the cause of everything,
Well, it was
everything.
for
But
me. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But I think, just to sort of differentiate for the purposes of this conversation, I think
Mhm.
what leapt to mind was, you know, starting out, in my 20s, and, even in college, and, when I was young, actually, even when I was young, little, like
Mhm.
young,
Mhm.
um, being told things, not necessarily by my parents, but either directly by a person or by the world, that whatever that thing was I wanted to do, um, I couldn't because I was a girl. And mind you, I was not talking about like deep sea Alaskan crab fishing or firefighting or astronauting or any of those things that are super typically male dominated. I was talking about writing words on paper.
Oh.
I remember my gym teacher, who was otherwise a nice guy, I guess. I remember him teaching us how to do push-ups and girls push-ups. And
Oh.
even though I was like, quote unquote, big air quotes on that one, girls push-ups. And I remember, even though I was maybe 7 at the time, I remember thinking like, I that doesn't sound right to there's something off about and I
Yeah.
didn't have the words for it, but I just remember thinking like, I
Gosh.
got an idea. Why don't you teach us all how to do push-ups, bro? Like,
But you couldn't
and
say that at that
no,
age.
of course. And I didn't have it. I didn't have it yet. Like, I didn't know. I just could
Right.
smell that something was unfair about it.
Mhm.
And I think what I would like to, that sound you hear is my son calling me, even though my phone is on do not disturb.
Yeah.
This is happening right now
I
in real
don't care.
time. My
I
17-year-old is calling me. He's working on his college applications. I think he needs some help. But in any case,
have to wait.
yeah, he'll have to wait. So, the what I wanted to highlight later, though, was for two things that I'll sort of pluck out as examples
Mhm.
that, when I was a journalist, I wrote a lot about I happened to write a lot about dating and relationships. It was not my only beat. I did politics. I did other, a lot of other beats.
Areas.
Um, and I also co-created one of the first big internet success stories, which was a comic book character called Breakup Girl, who helped people with romantic
What
emergencies.
was her name?
Her name was Breakup Girl. She still is Breakup Girl. So she helped people, of all people, with romantic emergencies. So the
Wow.
two things, and she was a major cult hit in the 90s, and we're bringing her back. So stay tuned. You heard it here. But what I didn't necessarily experience a lot of sexism in my own world of writing. In other words, from bosses or from internally, it was relatively okay. But what I did hear, the way people talked to me about it, about being a writer, was as if it was a hobby. In other words,
They
they
talked
would
down to
say
you.
things like, "Are you still writing?" Which would with that tone that
Oh,
no
I
one would
know.
ever say to a dude, "Are you still banking?" Like
Yeah.
no one would ever say that. That was one thing. And that drove me nuts. It was, and I wanted to like, I kind of wanted to like be a jerk when I answered and say like, yeah, if you mean all the awards I'm winning for hard hitting journalism that's actually changed laws and minds from NASCAR to Congress, let's talk. Like I kind of
Let's
wanted to
stop.
just
Let's
give an
stop. Let's stop.
obnoxious,
I need a
yeah,
little couple facts here. Okay, so number one, I told you earlier that I have a husband that needs a lot of attention. So I finally got a caretaker and I have him in a day program. And someone said to me, "Oh, what are you going to do with all that free time?" And I said, "Did you
cool.
forget? Did you forget I have a late life career I started 5 years ago during the pandemic? And I
Yeah.
have a YouTube channel and a podcast, and I wrote 4 books." So again, condescending. And the other thing I want to ask you, in what decade were you a teenager?
Let's see, I was born in 1969, so I was a teenager in the 80s.
Well, you're okay. Well, I was a teenager in the 60s. So if you think it was bad in the 80s, honey,
Oh yeah.
I
Oh
was
yeah.
offered a job when I was 18 I worked at Capitol Records and they had a office in Scranton, Pennsylvania, where I lived. And in the olden days, kids, we used to have the vinyl and people would order albums and we
Sure.
had a record club. So I worked for the Capitol Record Club and I had a job where people would complain about their record. So I'd replace it or whatever their situation was. And Capitol Records decided they wanted to build a bigger office in Los Angeles. Okay, this was in 1967, I believe. And that is the building you see in every single movie with
Yes.
that round that looks like records. And I can't handle seeing it because it's a bad reminder for me. So they
Yeah.
offered me a job there to teach people, and then they'd send me home to Scranton, and they would pay for my lodging and everything. And my father told me I had a plane ticket, everything. I'll throw myself in front of the plane. You are not going. Okay. And at 18, I didn't have the balls, and that's a masculine
Hmm.
term, but I don't care.
Yeah.
I didn't have the canones or whatever you want to call them to stand up to my father. So I lost it. You get where I can relate to you,
Yep.
but it was still that way in the 80s, but it was more nuanced, let's say.
Yeah. And well, I'll bring us up to the present in just a minute. You'll hear that a lot of the stuff that was challenging when I switched to comedy, you'll hear that a lot of stuff that was challenging when I was doing comedy in the 90s is still happening. Like
Still,
right now, like we have like it's like bro, it's 2025. How
we're going back to
um
the 60s, honey.
yeah, yeah.
Trust me.
So yeah. So that was one thing. And then the when I worked on this when Chris and I, my creative partner and I created this superhero, and we had it was a huge deal. We had a TV show, we had books, we had a live show, we had an incredibly successful website, etc. But whenever I talked to someone who hadn't really heard about it,
Yeah.
and I would say, well, we co-created a superhero who has sort of a comic book world, who helps men, women, and others with romantic emergencies in this whole comic book world. And they would say, "Oh, is that like Sex in the City?" And I'd be like, "It is not at all like Sex and the City. Like, what are you? And then at first I was like, what are they talking about? Like, did I say something that made them think that? And then I said, and there's no shade to Sex and the City.
No,
Like,
but
but
it's
I'm like,
not.
it is not at, it's like, oh, we're having Mexican food for dinner. Oh, is that like British tea time? Like
Yeah,
what? No, what are you talking about?
yeah.
And I think
They
that
didn't get it.
there were not enough. It was two failures. One is that there was not enough kind of famous mainstream pop culture that centered women. And by the way, and side note, Breakup Girl was actually our audience was totally mixed. It was not a women, quote unquote, women's property, but be that as it may, it had a female main character. So of course it's for women, everyone assumed.
The internet wasn't actually being accessed in the 80s the way it is
Oh
now.
no, this is the 90s. This is the 90s now. I skipped to like
Okay.
92. So it was early. But we were the one of the first big success stories. And but then I realized it's first of all there is a lack of female driven um um pop culture, and then plus add that to a failure of imagination on the and a failure of actually literally listening to a woman talk,
Yeah.
i.e. me, on the part of someone who had asked that, because they were like, oh, they do a thing that's about women, that must be just like the only other thing about women I know. Like, and that's
And
and
this
so
was
that
even
drove me up
this was
a
even
wall.
women. Even you got that remark even from women.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean,
Interesting.
that drove me nuts. And then cut to, so like, did I just to be clear, did I suffer grievously every day? No, but did it affect everything from my career choices to my mood? Yes.
Yes,
And
frustration,
like
definitely.
one
Yes.
wonders what opportunities was I not offered? I will never know because I was a woman. And then, cut to stand up um in the
Oh,
90s, and I
oh
love doing
boy.
stand up. Let me be clear. I loved it. And I was fortunate enough to sort of find wonderful people to hang out with, and I'm picky. I don't like to hang out with people or like peers or people like managers who are yucky. So like I was able to be
Right.
choosy and hang out with wonderful creative people who made me funnier, and we had a great time.
Great.
But the world of it, it was very normal to be introduced as the only woman on the line, to be the only woman on the lineup, and
Yeah.
then be introduced as, and now we got a lady coming to the
Of
stage. More often
course.
than not, the MC would forget your name.
So he'd
Like
say,
he, by the way, would remember everyone else's names and credits. And then he'd be like, now we got a lady coming to the stage. I think she works at Lifetime or something, which I didn't. And here she comes, and or you
yeah,
would call up and ask for a spot at a club where you already had access to, and they were, and how about the Thursday, Thursday 8 o'clock show or whatever, and they'd say, oh, we already have a woman. Or they would change you in the lineup so that they wouldn't have two women next to each other because we were diverse. So they wanted to, quote unquote, so they wanted to spread out the diversity. Now, and again, I don't know what opportunities I didn't get because there was this low hum or explicit. Like what I
mhm.
mean by low hum is it's not that low a hum, it's actually like saying it out loud. But I, thank God, did not experience like much worse stuff that we all know, that women, could not work at, decided that they could not work at certain clubs because they would be harassed at best. And
Yes.
so that's an
Sexual,
economic issue.
sexual
That's,
harassment is something that still goes on, but
oh
it
yeah.
was worse. The 60s,
It was worse. There was
the
impunity. Yeah, there was total impunity. And
nobody
like,
talked about it until we had the Me Too movement.
yeah, yeah.
So that,
So exactly. So like and that's an economic issue because if a woman can work at 2/5 of the clubs that men can work at, they can't rise as fast. They can't make enough money.
of
Um,
course.
so it's a real issue. It's not just the harm is the harassment itself, but the harm is bigger than that. So
Yeah.
I will say that two things are true at once. One is that I cannot believe, but like stuff like that still happens today in 2025.
Yeah.
At the same time, in the entire world of comedy, whether it's stand up or sketch or improv or TV writing or late night or all of the things, it is also So much better. So it's both like surprisingly still bad
Yeah,
and amazingly so much better at the exact same time. I'm
yeah,
happy to report. And so really that's what I wanted to talk about. Like my, the backstory is really those sort of systemic, if you will, hurdles that were sometimes I experienced them individually, but those were individual expressions of these really, really bad systemic hurdles that are many of which are still in
I
place.
want to ask you what you think about what's going on today. Because as a person that was there when they passed Roe versus Wade, as
Yep.
a person that was there in 1975 when women were allowed to have credit cards, and Gloria Steinem was my hero, and Jane
Yep.
Fonda, and I went through the blood of the war of the sexes and saw
Yep.
all these changes. And today, I am seeing them being taken away.
Yep.
When they overturned Roe versus Wade, I almost had a breakdown. I'm like, oh
I
my
know. I bled from the
Handmaid's Tale.
eyeballs. I
I'm
know.
like
It,
Handmaid's Tale. I don't know if you know that story, The Handmaid's Tale.
yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
familiar. Yeah.
And all they talk about is women should we should be having more babies, and all the Christian stuff.
Under his eye. Yep.
Yes, that's right from the show. And one by one, and I said 2 years ago to a black gay male friend of mine, and I said, Jewel, watch. And this is before they overturned the Roe versus Wade. People of color, women, and LGBTQ are in deep trouble. The straight white men want to push us back down to where we used to be. And I was right.
You
Do
were
you
right.
see,
Yep.
you see it, right?
Completely right. And like the craziness is that like they got us into this mess. Like as someone once said, like I really just feel like men are not sending us their best people. Like, and they're talking about how like they're like we want to keep doing what we're doing because we've built this, because we built all of this stuff. And I'm like, you built it poorly. You built societies that depend on the labor and input and lift it and you built let me back up. You built societies that benefit from the power of one half of your population at best. So like well played, sirs. Like those are not good societies.
No,
Like that
no.
like how much if you never mind like it doesn't even have to be a feminist argument, although it is, but to say like like what if it was a board game, right? What if it was a game like Risk and one player, or one of those games, right, that we all played, what if one player had built a society in
Mhm.
which all of its members thrived and had access to healthcare and wages and generational wealth and all that, and could sort of live to their fullest and contribute economically to their fullest. That's one player, player one. Player two has built a society that is narrowly focused on one form of one version of strength and power, and that version of strength and power does the opposite and make sure that 50% of their population is actually not contributing
Like
as much as
great
they
white
could to
men.
the health of that society.
I
Who's going to
always
win
go
that
back.
game? Who's going
I
to win that game? The first
always,
guy. Oh
I
my God.
always go back to straight white men. They're afraid of us. And I'm trying to think who said it. I can't. But someone has a quote that, oh, I know. Why do you think when men are afraid of women? And they said, because they're afraid they will laugh at them. And why do you think women are afraid of men? Because they think they'll kill them.
Yes,
And it's true.
it's true.
I had a second husband that tried to kill me. And
Sorry to hear that.
oh no, it's in my book. It's okay. It's a good book.
We dealt. We dealt. Okay. Okay.
Raised by wolves, trapped by demons. Go look it up.
Yeah.
I self-published on Amazon and Audible, but I survived. My point being, it was the 70s, and men were killing wives and girlfriends and getting away with it. And that is a fact, a
Yeah.
fact.
I mean, it used to be legal to rape your wife if she was your wife.
Absolutely. He actually stopped his car. I was out with a man and I had two other males in our party, jumped out of the car, went straight at me, punched me straight in the face, knocked me out. I was unconscious. I had him arrested, and you have to go to grand jury first, right? I had three witnesses, Lynn, three witnesses. They didn't pass a true bill. It didn't go to court. And this was in 1977. And I went into the DA's office right then. And I said, I don't know if it was, who he knows. I don't know if it was money involved, but I want you to know that I am leaving here and I'm going to buy a gun. And the DA said to me, I don't think you should tell me that. And I said, oh, I do think I should tell you that because you failed me. And I have two children and I'm going to protect myself. And Lynn, I went and bought a gun. And I didn't have to use it, but it
Thank
took
God.
me years to get rid of him. Years of torment.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know that is, I know you're beyond it. I'm sorry that it
Oh,
happened.
I know.
I'm sorry also that it is not a unique story with all due
Oh, I
respect.
know, I know. I had years of
Like,
counseling. Years. I'm still in counseling between family of origin and abusive husbands and alcoholism. I've done it all, but I've survived it all. And that's because I'm a woman. And women are stronger than men. Women are stronger.
obviously. I remember when my mom was a feminist, and I remember, and we had all the women in the family were like, and I'm gonna paint with too broad a brush here, but with some very clear exceptions, many of the women in the family were clearly the ones running the show. Whether they had a nice husband who was just not in charge, or whether they had sort of a doofus, like harmless doofus of a husband, or whether they had an actual bad dude. It was we
They
had the
worked
array,
around it.
and thank God my mom married an absolutely fantastic guy. Thank God, I was very lucky with both my parents. But in any case, I remember, like, specifically, I remember sitting at the picnic table we had in our little yard when
Mm.
when I was little-ish. I was like 10, and I remember saying to my mom, you know, and I was old enough to remember that there were men's classified ads and women's classified ads. I don't mean personal ads. I mean men's jobs and women's, what
Yeah,
men's
I
jobs
was
and women's jobs. So
looking
like,
for, yeah,
right, a
I was looking
secretary
for,
versus construction,
yes.
whatever. Anyway, so like, and so I had been, fed this diet. I knew it was wrong, but I've been clearly fed this diet of, men or, women or the weaker sex, whatever.
Yeah,
Not in my own, not in my own house, but in the world.
yeah.
And I remember specifically sitting down with my mom and saying, Mom, I know that, like, everyone says that, like, the whole idea is that, like, men are stronger and stuff, but like, if you kind of look at our family and stuff and our friends, it seems like it's the women who are stronger. And
Yeah.
my mother was like, I don't know who's just listening, but my mother was like, and not watching, but my mother was like, yes, my mother was like, stood up from the picnic table, was like, you got it, you're catching on, kid, you're catching on, like, you're totally right.
What's your ethnicity?
My mother was, her parents were first generation immigrants from Poland. They were Jews from Poland, and the rest of their family was murdered in the war,
Yeah.
except
Oh,
for one
excuse me.
cousin
But
who survived.
that really didn't happen.
Oh, well, there's that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So,
how about your father's side?
and my father's side, came from, well, a totally different background. My father, his people started coming in the 1700s, not Mayflowery.
What country?
They went to the south. They came from like Prussia and
Oh,
England
okay.
and
Okay.
Scotland and there, and then they fought in the American Revolution, and stayed in the south.
Oh, they
So
wanted to be.
he
Oh,
Yeah, so they came like through Pennsylvania, but then they kept going down. So they went to North Carolina, Georgia. My dad's was from
farther
Georgia.
south you get.
So,
Mhm.
huh?
Farther south you get, the more prejudice it was, and the less
Yeah.
open. I mean,
Yeah,
it's still the
although
same.
they it was, so they met in the 60s, and it was
Yeah.
definitely
Yeah.
not the coupling that, the pair that either side had
Yeah.
predicted.
Yeah.
um but after some but it's and so I think actually it was my mom's parents who were a little more puzzled by it, because they really
You want a
it
nice
was just so
Jewish guy.
foreign, right? And it was just, and he was like there was no, like right now Atlanta definitely still is the South, but there's lots of Atlanta where you can like walk down the street and you could be
Yeah.
anywhere, right? But like that was not true in the 60s. It was a different world for them. Whereas for my dad's family, his mother was very religious,
Are they
and so
Christian?
she yes, and so she actually sort of, it was a little condescending, but she actually was not, she was not kind of undone by the idea of my dad marrying a Jew, because at least they fit into her story
Yeah,
about how religion works, and so it wasn't as much of a scandal on that
I
end.
know. But that whole
um
Jewish marrying Jewish thing still is there. I mean,
It's
there's a
still, yes,
problem.
but back then it was
Jewish
just much,
marriage.
yeah.
I want you to marry a nice Jewish doctor.
Well, and my mom's parents weren't even like, I mean, yes, that's a thing, but my mom's parents weren't even. It was just that because in the 60s the United States did not know itself as well. So like
Right?
Georgia could have been Mars to them. They didn't, like, they were just immigrants from Poland. They hadn't been here very long.
Yeah.
And they knew their enclave in New York City. And like, I'm not saying that they were provincial or parochial or limited or stupid or anything like that. They just had, when would they have had an opportunity to
Yeah.
know anything about the American South, about Georgia, about, like, so to them it was less that he wasn't Jewish and more that he was just utterly alien to them. They didn't it was it utterly alien. So I that's my impression that I
But
get
not
from the
to your
stories that were
mother.
told.
But not to your
Um
mother, obviously.
no,
Because
I mean, no, yeah, they met up north, and
there was some connection.
yeah,
Yeah.
they had a fantastic marriage. So thank God, I was really, really lucky. So
And the
there you
worst
go.
thing, they went through a lot, but in the 60s, for a black and a white to get married, well, they would have hung the man.
Yeah, so they didn't have anything like that. They did not have to, they had to work some stuff out with their families, but they felt safe walking down the
And you
street.
know what's very sad to me, Lynn, is I'm talking about the generation now. I don't know if it's XYZ, but 25 and under. They do not know the history of the 60s and the 50s and segregation and the battle that women had. And they don't know anything about that. And they don't read books. They don't, I mean, they don't,
On the upside, I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you, but there's something that I've noticed on the upside, which is, and my kids are smart, but they're products in public schools, and nothing fancy. And the kids, regardless of how they're getting their information, yes, it's hard for them to imagine. Like when I say, like, yeah, there used to be separate classified ad sections, they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like
they
they,
should
but at
know.
this, but they believe me, but
Yeah,
it's like they can't understand it. But what they have an understanding of structural racism and structural
we did.
sexism
We
that
did.
we did not have at
No,
all. Like they have, that is their assumption. It's not even like they learned it in a special class, like they or at like a fancy school. Like
right.
I'm talking about like my kids and their friends,
Mhm.
like totally haven't. When we I went to an all girls high school, and it was very feminist in many ways. But it was still, we still had the idea. We were taught like, you know, we were taught that like it was the time of, it was pretty typical for like girls to get like harassed or even groped on the subway, and everyone rode the subway to school because it was in the city. Or um and there was, all of the sort of so-called education about avoiding rape was about not getting raped.
Mhm.
There was no conversation about having boys not rape, none. And so and we didn't learn, we got I got a pretty good education in my fancy school for in all the ways that are the most important. In other words, I really learned how to do schoolwork, and I learned how to write and think, and I got and the deepest stuff was the most important. But about we didn't learn about structural inequality at all. We just like it was we just didn't. And we read A Separate Piece, which I freaking hate. It's just the worst book. I don't know why we read that book all the time, about two white dudes at a prep school, right? And we read that book as if it was about humans, like as if it was about society. At best, whether you like it or not, some people love that book. It's about two dudes, and it's about privilege, and it's about patriarchy, and like that's fine. That's totally fine. But it's about a specific. It's not about the human condition.
No,
It's about patriarchy, and so
and it's
like
presented as if it's a normal thing.
yes, and
Yeah.
so my point is with my kids had make solid public school education, but it's public school, nothing fancy. This is not stuff they learn from me, but my kids and their friends, and like whatever, they're New York City kids, but still, like they understand everything in a structural context. They would read A Separate Piece and be like, "Well, I understand." Like The Great Gatsby, the same thing. They read The Great Gat, which I love. I hated A Separate Piece, love The Great Gatsby.
I
They
did.
understand it to be set in a certain time and place and indicative of a certain societal structure, as opposed to being about like you know humans,
Wait,
you know like
I'm
regular humans.
I'm going to take some
So
books. Let's start with books.
yeah,
I was lucky enough. I don't know who in the universe set this up for me, but I lived across the street from a public library. Across the street. So I had escape from my
that's
crazy,
fantastic.
was
Yeah,
fantastic. So I was a big reader. And I would go to that library and get books, and I would go to my room and I would put my Beatles records on or my Rolling Stone or whatever. And, you know, I would, my parents at certain times would come up and say, come down with the rest of the family. Like I could have very happily stayed in that room reading books and listening to
yeah.
them. So the one day, and I was in high school, and I went across the street and I wanted Gone with the Wind. Okay. And the librarian said, that's in the adult section. You can't have it. I said, well, I want to read it. And I'm like, I was 15. I went back and I got my mother. I said, Mom, you go over there and get me that book. And she did.
Good for you, mom.
But now they're taking it off the shelves.
Oh, God damn it, I know. Well,
It's
but
one of the
also
books that
also
want to burn.
and I mean, my kids now would watch that and be like, the ending is rape. And when we watched it, we were like, that's so romantic. Like we
Well,
didn't understand,
yes. Yes.
um, I mean, no
We,
shit. It's an
no,
amazing movie that everyone should see as an artifact. Like my dad
yes.
saw it 1 bazillion times and would quote from it probably daily.
Oh,
Um,
I love the book and the
it's also
movie.
super racist, but that
Yes.
doesn't mean it can't be viewed as a
Period
artifact of its
piece.
time
Yeah.
and
Why do they need to
analyzed as
take,
such.
why do they have to put that on the banned books list? Like, because it shows
That's
segregation.
crazy.
This is my point. The books that I read as a teenager are the books that they want to burn. And I'm like, what?
I know.
I read Hemingway and Fitzgerald and
Sure.
writers of the day. I mean, they wrote their books in the 40s and 50s, and I read them in the 60s and 70s. And I love them. And when I became a writer myself, um, I think I write more like that type of a writer, and I'll tell you why. When I decided to write my first book, I told my best friend, who's 10 years older than me. So I was 72, she was 82, Jewish woman. And I said, I'm writing a book. And she said to me, well, maybe you should take some writing lessons first. And my immediate response was, I don't think Hemingway and Fitzgerald took writing lessons.
Probably not.
Probably not.
Probably no one ever tells a man to get better at anything. They're
No.
always like, you can do it.
And I
Yeah,
said, no, I'm writing my life story. I don't need writing lessons. I want it to flow, and I'm going to write a good book. And I did. And it has 5-star reviews, like 40 of them on
amazing.
Amazon and I'm on. So, yes, again, she was an older woman. So she was still set in that pattern too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But no one ever tells a dude. If a dude's like, I'm gonna, just gonna
How?
that happens with dudes in comedy all the time. Many of them, no shade, because a lot of them absolutely work very hard, and comedy is hard for everyone, even if you are a straight white dude, it's
Yes.
hard. But
Yeah.
a lot of dudes are like, well, I mean, at work they tell me I'm funny, so I don't know, I'm just gonna get up there and just like say whatever I think. And guess what? That dude does not succeed in comedy.
What doesn't?
Like just because they think that they can, my God, the level of arrogance, and
Yes.
mediocrity.
I get it. I get
Um,
it.
but
Well,
and the ones that work at it actually succeed. Guess what?
Joy
Yeah,
Behar. Good example, Joy Behar. She was a stand-up comedian for many years, but
yeah,
she went through shit. She went through hell
sure.
in the
Yeah,
beginning, and she just kept going. And
yeah.
that's what we have to do. And we have to work twice as hard, maybe three times as hard.
There's that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what are you working on now? Is it a new project?
Well, this is something that I love to talk about because obviously it's my passion, but also because I have a message for your listeners
Yes,
about
loud
this,
and
which is
clear.
what's that?
I said loud and clear.
Yeah,
Yes.
loud and clear, exactly. Um, which is so my company is called Gold Comedy, and we are a comedy school and professional network and content studio where women and non-binary creators and others, as we like to say, can build their comedy careers or their creative side hustles
Mm-hmm.
and become part of a powerful community and make funny stuff that actually gets seen on all different kinds of stages and screens.
Okay.
So, yes, we for sure have plenty of members who are, in their 20s and 30s and they're hustling and they're able to stay up late and, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
and do all those comedy jobs, whether it's stand up or sketch or improv or late night TV writing or sitcom
Mhm.
writing, all those things. Um, but we also have this really interesting and powerful subset of women who are in their, 40s and up and up and up, who are coming with real seriousness of purpose, not just like, "Oh, I'm going to try it out one time," which is also fine. You're welcome to do that. But with real seriousness of purpose, in a moment in their lives when they, let's say, have an empty nest all of a sudden, or when they're at the top of their career in something else and sort of there's less hustle, and more time.
Yeah.
Or whether it's since the pandemic, and in the pandemic, they were like, wait a minute, reassessing life, is this all there is? They're in that moment of like, I do have a book I need to write, or I do have a solo show I need to do, or I do have a TV show that I want to pitch, but I
Mhm.
don't know how. And I look around, and all of the comedy opportunities, or maybe even the writing classes, are mostly white dudes in their 20s. And they may be very nice white dudes in their 20s,
Yeah,
but I don't feel automatically that they will be my people. And
exactly.
so we're here for that. And so
You're
we
an
have women.
advocate. You're an advocate, not just a
Yes,
fan.
and like a safe space, and like we take you seriously. We don't think that you're going to be less funny. We don't call you a woman comic. You're a comic. We don't call you a woman writer. You're a writer.
Right.
And we have in particular, so two examples. We have a woman named Rocky who is a young grandmother. She lives in North Carolina, but not near a big city. She takes care of her grandchildren. She takes care of an adult son with special needs. And she came to us a few years ago, and she tells the story this way. She says, I knew I was funny, which she is. I knew I was funny, but I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to write a joke. I didn't know how to structure it. I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And so she came to us and she worked her butt off. And we finally just met in person because I'm in New York, and she came to New York to debut her first half hour of stand up in a New York City solo show festival that
Wow.
she's now going to take on the road, and we're actually going to help her produce it. Okay.
Oh, that's
So
fantastic.
she was serious. Like she was
Yeah.
serious about this. And this is her third career now.
There you go.
Um, and
So,
the other Just
Well,
go ahead.
I have to cut you because you know we talked for an hour already.
Woo. Okay. So you two can be like Rocky is what I'm saying. Whether it's stand up
That's
or writing your first TV show or
yeah.
anything like that,
Or
you
like
still
me,
got it and you can develop it.
72 years old. And people said, what? Well, I said, do you remember Grandma Moses? When did she start?
Yeah.
Excuse me. And my mind is still working. And 5 years later, I have a career. I definitely have a career. And now I
Yeah.
have people emailing me, public relations people for their people. That means I'm being noticed.
Yeah,
And that's
for
what
sure.
now you have to come back. We covered a lot.
Okay.
We covered a lot of stuff, but I would like to get a little dive in a little more. So
Sure.
listeners, wow, what a great dynamic person we had on today. And I will have in the show notes all the information where you can look her up. All right.
Yes, please. Great.
And Lynn, we'll talk soon. Thank
I
you.
love it. Let's keep it going. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me and thanks for listening.
It was wonderful. All right, go out there and be an advocate.